So I think we're ready to start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of the VAID Geo webinar series for 2024. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Irina Peltegova. I'm a senior renewable power market analyst at VAID, and I'll be moderating today's session. As you can see from the title, we'll be looking into the market dynamics of the European geo market. We'll be releasing an analyst update shortly on the same topic that you'll be able to access for free on the VAID website. So the presentations you hear today are based on that update. So where are we at this stage in the market? We had a very bullish 2022, but then the European geo market experienced very high volatility last year with a prevailing bearish trend settling in from the summer and continuing and even accelerating quite a lot at the start of this year. An oversupply seems to be the main price driver due to growing renewables build out, very good weather conditions, and also reduced electricity demand. Now the question is this the new norm, or can we expect a price recovery? I'm joined today by my colleagues, Christos Mavrogiannis, one of our renewable power market analysts, and Mary Polovtseva, our renewable policy analyst. So if we quickly go to the agenda, Chris will give an overview of the price developments in 2023 and the reasons for the high volatility we've observed. Then he'll walk you through the market fundamentals that are pointing to a significant oversupply, which could be compounded further in the short term by a flood of unsold geo volumes from recent auctions. But can an expected economic recovery reverse the scales? Then Mary will dive into the regulations and policies that will impact the geo market going forward, as well as the recently changed RE100 technical criteria that could also affect the market. We'll finish off with some concluding remarks and a Q&A session. Please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box here. We'll try to answer them all at the end. Before we begin with the presentations, just a very quick word on who we are. VAID provides advanced analytical services and insights in the dynamic low-carbon markets. You may know us previously as GreenFact. The company rebranded last year as we expanded our offering, and now we cover the renewables, power and gas markets, as well as the voluntary and compliance carbon markets. If you're interested to see our solutions, feel free to reach out after the webinar. And now I'm handing over the floor to Chris.
Thank you very much, Irina. Good to have me. Good to be here. So looking at the geo market for 2023, we could safely assume that it was a year of extreme volatility. We saw prices falling from an all-time high of 8.2 euro in March to even to 3 euro in the end of December, and it dropped even to 1.5 euro 2 weeks ago in January 2024. So besides the falling prices that we observed the second half of 2023, in matters of market value, the outstanding 2023 geos are actually at a record high of market value, which is close, we estimated to be close to 5 billion euro. And this record high will probably not be surpassed by 2024, as we expect, according to our estimations about the issuance of geos in 2024 and the demand, we expect that the market value of geos will probably be close to 4 billion euro, depending on the hydrological conditions. So looking at the price development, we could easily say that there were two events in the market that were the most significant drivers of prices. One was anticipated and one was difficult to be anticipated. The one that was anticipated, of course, was the UK geo Brexit, which was the scheduled withdrawal of the UK from the ECS geo market, but because the UK no longer accepts ECS geos since July 2023 for disclosure purposes. So basically, that development removed 40 terawatt hours of demand from the market, and we can see how, since this was an event that was scheduled to happen, we can see how the market reacted to that. And since May, prices started falling from the level of 7.5 euro to 6. But after this initial decline in prices that were caused by the geo Brexit, we saw for 2 months that prices remained stable around €6, around the level of €6 for the 2023 production. And then in mid-August, we saw that the heavy rainfall that took place in Norway actually increased the supply of hydro geos so much, and the expectations of the market for an oversupply, that prices started declining since then, and they didn't stop until 2 weeks ago, where we saw prices as low as €1.5. Uh, so next slide, please. Yeah, so taking a closer look to the hydrology, we can see how the rains of that happened in mid August have affected the energy content of reservoirs around the AB area, and more importantly, in Norway, we can see that in the graph on the left, that the week that coincides with the mid of August, actually the energy content level starts diverging a lot from the values of 2022, and actually this trend continues going on, and the divergence keeps increasing until November. So it was a period of a few months that we could see that the supply of hydrogeos would actually overshoot the levels of 2022 by a lot. Actually, the available data by AIB are complete until July 2000, until the production of July 2023, and then there are some data that are not complete until October, and from October onwards, we don't have available data. But with our medium-term forecast model that we launched last year, we are using generation data from NTOE to project the issuance of hydrogeos. And our model says basically that in 2023, the extra supply of hydrogeos compared to 2022 is going to be 53 terawatt hours, so around 53 terawatt hours of hydrogeos. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in this graph on the left, we can see how the market is very sensitive to changes in hydrological conditions. So we see that actually 2023 was a wetter year consistently from January until July, where there was a surplus of that accumulated until July that was up to 17, 18 terawatt hours of hydrogeos. And then the change in August was so abrupt that only in August, another 7.5 terawatt hours of geos were added in the supply on the supply side. And we see how until December, this surplus reached 53 terawatt hours of hydrogeos in the surplus. And the graph on the right shows how these changes in hydrology actually coincide very closely to changes in prices. Next slide, please. But there's not only hydro, there's also solar and wind. And on this front, we also saw stronger supply compared to 2022. Actually, 2023 was a year of record expansion of the installed capacity for wind and solar. We actually saw almost 70 gigawatts of new capacity being installed. But in 2023, we actually saw the impact of another aggressive increase of the capacity last year in 2022, and the results of the aggressive expansion this year will be seen in 2024 as the capacity comes online. Some of this new capacity comes online in the latest months of the year. So looking again at the projections of our medium-term forecast model, we see that the model predicts that the supply will be there will be an extra 36 terawatt hours of solar and wind GOs on the supply side. Next slide, please. And now looking at the demand side, the situation here is also bearish because in 2023 was actually a year of poor economic performance in the European Union area. So the largest economies of the EU had a GDP growth that was close to zero. And this harsh economic environment actually affected the consumption of power because of the reduced manufacturing and industrial output. So this reduction in power consumption is estimated to be around 82 terawatt hours of electricity, which equals to around 3 point something percent of the reduction of the electricity consumption. This, of course, the reduction of power consumption, of course, affects the cancellations because there's less need for cancellations if there's less power consumed. If we look at the 2022 data and make a back of the envelope calculation, cancellation was around 26% of power consumption. So if we apply the same ratio to 2023, then we could say that the reduction in demand for GOs, which means cancellation, would be around 21 terawatt hours of GOs. But this is not only that; it's also the effect is not just linear because a harsher economic environment for industries and businesses is also reducing the willingness to pay for green certificates. So this could actually have this could actually amplify the effect of on the cancellations. However, the European Central Bank forecasts that there will be a mild economic recovery in the end of 2024. So this will affect the power consumption, and it's actually projected by the International Energy Agency that the power consumption will increase by 1.8% in 2024 compared to 2023. Next slide, please. However, looking at the outlook for the supply of 2024, it depends really on the hydrological situation. So our long-term forecast model, which was also launched last year, is projecting that depending on the weather conditions, the supply of GOs will move somewhere between 760 terawatts and 850 terawatt hours. Now, what our model does is it can take the weather conditions that we saw in a specific year and then project the hydrology of the projected year according to these weather conditions. So in this case, in this graph, I took the weather conditions of 2022 to project the scenario of a dry 2024 because 2022 was quite a dry year, and I took the weather conditions of 2020 to project the scenario of a wet year, as it was a relatively wet year, 2020. So as you can see in the graph, the supply side of GOs will overshoot or move lower than the 2023 levels according to the hydrological situation. And looking at these numbers for supply and also assuming a business as usual growth of demand of cancellations, we could expect that prices, the annual average price of GOs for 2024 will move somewhere in the area between 4.5 euro and 6 euro. Considering that for 2023 the average price was around 6.1, this will mean that the value of the GOs will decrease. The average value of the outstanding GOs will decrease in 2024. Next slide, please. But also looking a bit into the short term, what we see here is that the auctions are going to play a role until March in the next 2 months. So on March we have the disclosure deadline for 2023, and there has been a situation developing in the Italian auctions that could actually have an effect in the prices on the prices in 2020 in March. So what has been happening is that GSE, which is the issuing body of Italy, has been offering since June, since the auction session of June, has been offering quantities in the auctions at a floor price that is actually way higher than the market price. And this, of course, has probably started because since June we have been seeing stagnant and then falling prices. But the auction session of June saw offered volumes of 5.5 terawatts and sold volumes of only 1.5 terawatts. So almost 4 terawatts remained unsold. And then in the next session of September, the same situation repeated itself, and we saw 8.5 terawatts remaining unsold. And then in December, this number grew to almost 12 terawatts being unsold. But until December, the offered volumes, among them, there were no volumes that would expire until the next auction. However, in January, we saw volumes in the Italian auction that were offered that would expire until the next auction in March that were the volumes generated in January and February 2022 and 23. I'm sorry. And these were just 23 gigawatt hours, and they were offered at a very low floor price of 0.15. But what's happening here is that in March in the auction, the volumes that are being offered and will expire until the next auction of June will be for almost 4.3 terawatts. So I'm wondering what will happen if 4.3 terawatt hours are offered in one day at an almost zero floor price. And on top of that, we also expect the Greek issuing body, the PIP, to launch their first auction of subsidized GOs. And the estimated number of GOs that is in the account of the issuing body is up to 6 terawatts. We don't know how much of that is expiring. It could be 1 to 2 terawatts. But this on top of the Italian auctions could have a bearish effect on the short term. Next slide, please. So in this section of the presentation, I'm going to pass to Mary, who is our policy analyst. So Mary.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for your insights. Turning to the law and policy section, let's say from the outset that the long-term market drivers are increasingly affecting the geo market. Looking at historical price and policy developments, we can see that the second half of 2022 was rather bullish for the geo market, with Nordic hydro trades starting at €2 per megawatt hour in Q1 2022, soaring all the way up to €10 per megawatt hour towards the year's end. This price development was largely underpinned by market fundamentals, as low reservoir levels led to scarcity of supply, therefore driving the prices up. On the demand side, we have legislative and regulatory incentives that have been supporting the role of GEOs. For instance, GEOs are mandatory under the Renewable Energy Directive and under the Internal Electricity Market Directive. In 2023, GEO prices stabilized in the first half of the year and then followed the downward trajectory going into 2024, as Chris has described. What is certain is while the short-term drivers affect price dynamics for any given year, long-term drivers such as regulatory changes set the overall trend for the market. They will become more important steering the price curve, affecting the willingness to pay and geo demand. One such example that I could cite is the state aid for indirect emission costs, whereby the European Commission compensates European producers for costs incurred under the emission trading scheme. To fulfill the criteria to receive the state aid, companies need to fulfill one of the criteria, which is to source at least 30% of renewable or carbon-free electricity. And to prove that, the origin of electricity needs to be supplemented by market-based method, meaning GEOs or PPAs. As a result of state aid, a new strata of consumers will be entering the market, namely industrial users, which will drive the demand for GEOs up both in the short and long run. Trade-exposed power-intensive industry has large potential for driving demand in the GEO market through regulatory incentives and need for electrification, which goes against the trend that we have seen in 2023 with decreasing electricity demand from these industries due to the economic conditions. Looking at the GEO bulls and bears beyond 2023, we have the Hydrogen Delegated Act, which sets out the criteria for the production of renewable fuels of non-biological origin. One of these criteria is to consume renewable electricity, and to prove the origin of this electricity, the Commission instructs that renewable GEOs need to be cancelled, which has the potential of reducing the supply of trading certificates on the market, thereby altering the supply and demand balance. Second, there's also a risk of renewable capacity cannibalization, as the Commission estimates that approximately 500 terawatt-hours of renewable electricity would be required to match EU's ambition of 10 million tons of domestic RFNBO production by 2030. For comparison, around 750 terawatt-hours of GEOs were cancelled in Europe in 2022. Taken together, all these signals is that regulatory changes will increasingly steer the market with greater electrification of the economy and higher corporate and industrial demand, affecting the supply and demand balance on the GEO market. Next slide, please. Well, now let's take a look at the cornerstone of the European Green Deal, which is the Renewable Energy Directive, which sets the decarbonization course of the European Union. The directive entered into force in November 2023, and it raises the share of renewable energy in final energy consumption in the EU to 42.5% by 2030. It also sets new targets for transport, industry, and building sectors, and you can see the breakdown of these targets on in the table here. There is no union-wide target for electricity because it is left up to member states to decide what their share is going to be. Apart from that, the directive also introduces the concept of renewable acceleration zones, where renewable energy projects will benefit from faster permitting procedures. Also, across the bloc, renewable energy projects will generally benefit from faster permitting procedures. Turning directly to GEOs, Article 19 of the Renewable Energy Directive now allows to issue granular GEOs, meaning in kilowatt hours, thereby facilitating 24/7 matching, and it also helps to fulfill the criteria for the production of the renewable hydrogen. In addition, the Renewable Energy Directive also makes it possible to issue GEOs to renewable hydrogen. So as you can see, the total picture here is that the Renewable Energy Directive sets the trend for greater electrification of the economy, with more electricity consumers entering the GEO market. Together with the implementation of the sector coupling legislation, such as the Hydrogen Delegated Act, industrial consumers will have an increasing role to play in shaping the demand curve for renewable certificates. Next slide, please. So how do increased renewable targets translate into reality? Work is already underway to translate high renewable energy directive targets into national commitments. Up to date, 24 out of 27 member states have submitted their national energy and climate plans in the second half of last year, where they outlined the contours of renewable energy development until 2030. The results of their work can be seen in the graph on the left. As you can see, the level of ambition varies. However, most countries strive to significantly raise the share of renewables in their power sector. For instance, Denmark, Estonia, and Lithuania all aim to have 100% of green electricity. Achieving high renewable targets necessitates increased renewable capacity build-up, which in turn will bring an increased supply of GEOs to the market, spelling bearish sentiments long-term. On the right, you can see current renewable energy capacity plus plant capacity from the submitted national energy and climate plans, compared to the capacity needed to achieve 2030 targets as per the European Commission estimates. What emerges is that there is a gap in renewable capacity ambition equaling to almost 500 gigawatts. However, it is also worth bringing your attention to the fact that European countries will further revise and submit their NACPs with likely higher targets by summer 2024, meaning that this gap will likely narrow. Next slide, please. Now that I've discussed the Renewable Energy Directive, let's turn our attention to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which has the potential to significantly boost the geo demand on the market. Under the directive, which entered into force in 2024, 50,000 companies in the Union will be affected. What does the directive do? First, it introduces legally binding sustainability reporting requirements. Second, it obliges companies to make their decarbonization plans publicly available and set targets to cut their greenhouse gas emissions for 2030 and beyond. These companies will need to report according to the recently adopted European Sustainability Reporting Standards. What's in those standards? Well, in the visualization here, you can see that in the total greenhouse gas emissions criterion, companies are to use dual reporting, which largely reflects the current practice in the voluntary market, whereby both location-based and market-based methods are used. In the criterion related to targets related to climate change mitigation, companies are free to pick either the location-based or market-based target. And finally, when it comes to energy consumption mix, the European Commission is very explicit in that market-based methods should be used, explicitly referencing GEOs and PPAs. Taken together, this legislation could have a largely bullish impact on the market. This corporate sustainability framework will be complemented by the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is yet to be endorsed by the Parliament and the Council and will likely enter into force sometime in 2024. It will oblige companies to have decarbonization plans in place, and it will affect 15,000 companies, which is a subset of the 50,000 companies belonging to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So now that I've spoken about the legislative bull, let's talk about the legislative bear, namely the French nuclear bear that might enter the market in Q1 2024. In November last year, the French government adopted a decree that extended the issuance of GEOs to non-renewable sources, making nuclear GEOs possible. On the supply side, EDF plans to sell GEOs from its nuclear fleet and assesses the volume of nuclear GEOs it will sell on the market without flooding it and drastically lowering prices. As a result, we have no clear picture as to the volumes of nuclear GEOs entering the market. The graph on the right-hand side shows the market for nuclear GEOs is already oversupplied, and if more French certificates were to hit the market, the price levels for nuclear GEOs would likely sink. These currently trade at below the €1 per megawatt hour mark for 2023 vintage. Time-wise, we expect the first nuclear GEOs trades from France to come in the Q1 2024. On the demand side, the prospect of French nuclear GEOs could dampen renewable certificate prices to the extent that the market is more focused on the greenhouse gas accounting rather than the renewable attributes. What does that mean? Well, let me explain. The life cycle emissions of nuclear energy are lower or equal to those of renewable energy sources. If companies are mostly concerned with lowering their greenhouse gas emissions, as opposed to sourcing their electricity from renewable sources exclusively, we could potentially observe a corporate demand switch away from renewable GEOs towards nuclear GEOs. Next slide, please. And now that I've covered the legislative and policy changes that exert significant pressure on the market, let's turn to the voluntary side of the market. RE100 updated technical criteria went live in January 2024. The new criteria raised the bar for corporate renewable electricity procurement by introducing a 15-year age limit on commissioning or repowering power plants and a modified market boundary. What effect will this have on the market? Well, let's take a look at the breakdown of RE100 sourcing methods, which you can see on the slide. In 2021, RE100 represented around 21 terawatt-hours of corporate demand for unbundled certificates in Europe. Now compare this to the 715 terawatt-hours of cancelled GEOs in Europe that same year, and you will see that while RE100 is important in driving corporate demand for GEOs, it only represents a tiny fraction of demand in the market. What about the Nordic hydro GEOs, you might ask, which will be affected by the age limit imposed by the technical criteria? The age limit is expected to reduce the pool of power plants available for RE100 companies. If you look at Norway, for instance, most hydropower stations will be ineligible. The current average age of Nordic hydroelectric stations is around 46 years old, meaning that demand from RE100 members for Norwegian benchmark GEOs will likely dry out from 2024 onwards. Quantifying the impact, we can see that in 2021, RE100 sourced close to 3 terawatt-hours of GEOs from Norway, while the total issuance of Norwegian hydro during that same period stood at 142 terawatt-hours. So while this new technical criteria will likely decrease demand for Norwegian GEOs from RE100 companies, they are absolutely unlikely to have a sizable market impact. At Vate, we expect this shift in the demand profile of RE100 members to be more focused on sourcing renewable electricity from younger plants such as wind and solar. Any fallout of RE100 demand could be compensated by rising corporate demand from the CCRD compliant companies that I have discussed in one of the previous slides. And now I will pass the torch on to Chris, who will give us the wrap up of his part of the presentation.
Yeah, so basically, looking back at 2023, we saw a year that was extremely bearish, and it was this was basically driven by reduced demand, which was caused by the geo-Brexit, but also the major driving force driving down prices was the oversupply by the increased hydro production. Now looking at 2024, as I said in my presentation, on the short term, we will see some mostly bearish effect by the auctions, and also the final results for the supply will depend on the weather, on the hydrological conditions. Also, we are expecting in 2024, we are expecting more solar and wind capacity to come online, which will bring in more supply from solar and wind. But there's also a bullish factor waiting for us at the end of the year, which will be the economic recovery, which will probably be mild, but it will probably support the demand to an extent. But 2024 seems also a bearish year, and the weather will define if it's going to be more bearish than 2023 or less. As I said before, we expect the prices to move somewhere between 4.6 and 5.8 euro. So basically, that's the outline for 2024. And Mary, you can proceed with your conclusion.
Yes, and circling back to the policy section, our market data and fundamentals highlight that regulatory drivers are becoming increasingly important for the GEO market. GEO prices going forward will depend on synergies between sector coupling and growing corporate and industrial demand, giving rise to new customer profiles on the market. As a result of regulatory and voluntary standards such as RE100 that target specific attributes, we may see premiums arising for specific GEOs, for instance, from younger solar and power plants. And lastly, 2024 might well become the year of the French nuclear bear, and we might even see the switch from renewable to nuclear GEOs. So this is definitely a trend that will be interesting to look out for in 2024. And with that, I conclude our presentation.
Thank you very much, both Chris and Mary. Really insightful information there. As we heard, like we drilled really deep into all the fundamental drivers, which, as Chris summarized, at the moment look predominantly bearish. But we could also see some demand recovery, not only from the economic kind of outlook, but also from the regulations and policies that Mary talked about. We have now a few more minutes to answer some questions from the audience. You can keep putting them in the Q&A section. There is one that maybe I can cover. So it's about basically the weather effect on the geo prices. So why would weather actually affect the geo price if the market is fundamentally very long? Well, I guess to an extent, when you have a limited lifespan of 12 months for a geo, this restricts to an extent how long the geo market can be. So the oversupply gets consistently, eaten up to various degrees by the expired geos. For sure, of course, there's also the possibility of swapping vintages for disclosure, which allows the market to accumulate a certain level of length. And of course, the fact that the markets are that kind of transparent doesn't really, contribute to like a, just having a very clear view, I guess. But maybe Chris can also add to that question. Chris, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry, sorry for that. Yeah, basically, considering how long the supply in the market will be, it has to do also with the lifespan of the geos, which is 12 months. So any possible oversupply is eaten up by expirers. But also here, the question is, is the 18-month lifespan rule that was introduced in the Renewable Energy Directive in 2018 implemented in many countries? Not really, because this rule means that you can transfer the geo until the 12 months of the lifetime of the geo, and then for 6 months it can't be transferred anymore, but can be cancelled. And this could mean that some of the oversupply would be rolled over to 2024. If this was the case, we would see this transfer of this rollover of the oversupply from 2023 to 2024 if the price of 2024 was converging with 2023. But the truth is that many countries don't implement this rule, and it's not the rules are not very transparent on this. So, for example, Italy started implementing this rule for the 18 months of a lifespan since November, past November in 2023. So, yes, the main answer here is the lifetime of the geo, which is 12 months.
Thank you, Chris. And one question for Mary. Why are the member states' renewable capacity ambitions, why do they appear so low? Or, are they going to stay so low, maybe?
Yes. So what happened is, unfortunately, the old gold friend by the name of bureaucracy. Initially, the talks for the Renewable Energy Directive started as Renewable Energy Directive 3, where the share of renewable energy was at 40%, and then RED 4, which came after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Commission decided to revise that target upwards to 45% of renewable share in the final energy consumption. So the lawmakers had to merge these separate institutional negotiations for RED 3 and RED 4 together, thereby delaying the lawmaking process. And as a result, member states didn't really have enough time and clarity as to what benchmark for the reduction of carbon emissions they should be using and what benchmark for renewable energy targets they should be using. So as a result, we have some inconsistency in the submitted national energy climate plans. But this will be rectified by summer 2024, where we'll certainly see higher ambition, as the European Commission will also provide feedback to member states.
Thank you, Mary. Wow, there's like lots of questions coming in. One that I'm just spotting, which I guess is something that, again, you, Mary, can answer, is to what extent do you factor, again, I lost it. Excuse me. To what extent do you factor in the impact of the whole problem, or there's the whole issue with double counting and double claiming that has affected, well, or rather was kind of raised in the market with the Icelandic problem last year?
Sorry, could you repeat the questions again? I think I might have missed it.
Yes.
There's so many questions pouring in that.
I lost it again. I'm really sorry. Okay, let's go for another one, just as it came about. What are your expectations on geo prices for the kind of following years, going further out, 2024, 2030? Would you expect that prices will decrease the more production comes from renewable energy?
Okay, I'm just jumping in on this question here, right? So one of the things, so my name is Daniel, by the way, the manager of the power certificates team here at VEI. But when you're looking for price development into beyond 2024, you will have to kind of consider what can I say, the credibility of governments reaching their targets, first of all. And then there's this sequencing in how targets are fulfilled, partially fulfilled in that sense. If it's like we also have new targets coming in concerning hydrogen production that can absorb, the demand for renewable electricity, and that obviously competes to off-takers of GEOs. So it's a bit the sequencing in a way, what you believe will drive the energy transition, if it's governments reaching their targets, or if it's corporates adopting voluntary voluntary purchase commitments, which we've seen increasingly being incentivized also through regulatory measures. So this will, in a way, determine how the price is moving forward. Now, I want to clarify one thing, like with our long-term model, which is projecting 5 or 4.8 euros now for 2024. It also, like that is a volume weighted average on an annual basis, right? And we have seen prices dropping from 4.7, but it also depends on parameters that are not captured in it. But our long-term model also brings in actual trades in it. So it may be that it needs to be revised, but that will be determined by how the economy is moving forward, and then in particular how the electricity demand is developing for those industries that are subject to regulatory incentives, such as power intensive industries that can receive state aid. There where we have seen the major drop. So these things will determine where we go in, and of course, as we say, weather. So I think that towards the mid-year, we will see how 2024 will develop forward. But each year are, to a certain degree, independent. I saw that someone was asking about the market length and saying that it's very, very long. And theoretically, you can swap vintages, right? But you can only swap the proximity of vintages, like the ones that are close to each other, considered as spot in this market. But this market is also characterized by a lack of transparency. So, and in that lack of transparency, some deals are disappearing and not being sold and expired, and so forth. So that also limits how the accumulation of length, apart from the fact that they only have a 12 months lifespan geos. So thank you. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Daniel, for the very, very detailed answer. I guess we can have one last question answered now, and we promise we'll get back to all of you who posted questions in the chat. It's just we are running slowly out of time. But there is one which is about, so do you see further harmonization of rules between EU countries coming, such as monthly matching, or issuance of subsidized yields, cancellation authorized not only by suppliers, so that basically, because if there's no harmonization on the market, this is hampering at the moment the market liquidity. So do you think that do you expect more harmonization that is likely to impact positively the liquidity?
To be honest, not really, because we don't see an initiative from the EIB to that. So if there's going to be a harmonization of the rules regarding the issuance of GOs for subsidized production, for example, electricity, that's something that lies in the responsibility of the member state. And since we haven't seen a declared policy from the EIB pushing towards that direction, then we are not going to see this soon, as these processes require some time to go from the policy phase to be becoming national law, for example. So no, I don't see much harmonization coming in these rules.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think, yes, this is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you found our insights useful. As I said in the beginning, feel free to reach out to us. You see our emails here on the screen. You can also read some of the latest analyst updates related to what was covered today. And also very soon we'll publish our big update with our market outlook. That is also something that you can look forward to. It will be shared shortly. So thank you very much for joining. I wish you a great day. Bye-bye.